Behold the power and excitement of Nintendo right in the palm of your hand.
The success of the Nintendo Game Boy can't be overstated. If you weren't a kid in that era, it's really hard to explain that it just hit different. Sitting in the backseat of your parents' car, playing Pokemon by the light of the passing street lamps. Because of this, it was pretty natural for popular games to get handheld versions too. Games like Street Fighter 2, Duke Nukem, and Austin Powers. Yeah, I'm actually not joking about that last one, but we're not going to talk about the Austin Powers game today. Wait, are we? Should we? Nah, I'll save it. Today we're looking at a Game Boy version of one of the best video games of all time, and one that I've talked about a few times here on the channel. It's also a game that I know flew under a lot of radars back in the day, but it didn't get past me, baby. Let's dive into Metal Gear Ghost Babel for the Game Boy Color. Actually, the game is just called Metal Gear Solid here in America and Europe. Ghost Babel is its Japanese name, but I mean, Ghost Babel is a really badass name, so we're definitely gonna keep calling it that. I think the only reason they didn't use that name outside of Japan is for marketing reasons, I would guess, but I really don't know. Plus, Ghost Babel abbreviated is GB. GB, like Game Boy. Get it? It's cute. Anyway, Ghost Babel dropped on the Game Boy Color in the year 2000, 2 years after Metal Gear Solid was released. Now, Metal Gear Solid barely fit on the PlayStation, much less a Game Boy Color cartridge. Thankfully, the Metal Gear series was no stranger to 2D action. Ghost Babel uses the gameplay from Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, which fits the platform perfectly. But in my opinion, the real big brain move here was instead of just copy-pasting the levels and events from Metal Gear Solid into 2D gameplay, they opted to create an original premise and story. This was always the best option in my opinion for these sorts of things. The Mega Man Game Boy versions are just like that. They ended up forming their own little continuity. It's really cool. Ghost Babel, of course, does borrow some beats from Metal Gear Solid, but honestly, it really doesn't have the same vibe at all. And I mean that as a compliment. It's truly its own thing. And I'm trying to organically build to it, but like, this game is so good. Ghost Babel takes place 7 years after the first Metal Gear game. Roy Campbell comes to Snake to pull him out of retirement for a job only he can do. But this time he isn't heading to Alaska. He's actually going back to outer heaven? Yep, a rebel faction known as the Gendra Liberation Front have taken over the base and are now calling it Gallowade? Even worse news, this group has hijacked a prototype Metal Gear named Gander and taken the entire research crew hostage. Now, the Gendra Liberation Front, or GLF,
Let's try to top that.
is led by Augustine Egwaban, a very terrifying looking guy who they call the General. He's hoping to use Gander to settle a civil war. He's also brought in a mercenary group called Black Chamber to help, so obviously Snake's gotta take care of this. So, with Colonel Campbell on comms, he makes his way to the base. In addition to Campbell, Mei Ling is also there for radio support, serving basically the same role she did in MGS1. Always happy to see a Mei Ling appearance. But that's the only familiar face. A character named Weasel gives Snake advice on combat and the Black Chamber mercenaries, while McBride is a CIA agent with knowledge of Africa and the political climate. Once Snake is in Africa, he meets up with the only survivor from Delta Force after her team was wiped out by Black Chamber. Her name is, it's Chris. It's Chris Jenner. Yeah. So Snake and Chris are going to team up, and now Snake has to go find Dr. Jimmy Harks, Metal Gear's chief engineer and basically the greatest character in the franchise. Seriously, we have a Jimmy emote in the Discord. We love him there. He's like Otacon, except in sort of peeing his pants. He just kind of whines, but he's great. We love him. Speaking of my community, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like and subscribe to stick around. I'm still sponsor free and putting these videos together on my own, so any bit helps. And if you really want to support me, consider joining my Patreon or YouTube membership. Details are all below. So as you progress through the game, you encounter the members of Black Chamber. These obviously serve as the majority of your boss fights, and I gotta say, these guys are sick. From their designs to the boss fights themselves, it's just so fun. You get a really good variety of encounters. The first boss, Slasher Hawk, fights with a boomerang, and you have to use well-placed grenades to take him down. It's a throwback to a Metal Gear 1 boss while also elevating it and making it feel more substantial like the Metal Gear Solid boss fights. You see this with Marionette Owl as well. They're a more paranormal enemy, kind of like Psycho Mantis, yet they're actually way creepier and more unhinged, if you can believe it. Speaking of, it's probably important to mention at this point that the game was rated E for everyone. Look, I don't know what kind of backroom handshake deals Konami was doing to get them that rating, because it is not toned down at all from the rest of the series. In fact, I would argue that some aspects of this game are even darker conceptually than anything in Metal Gear Solid. The only thing that was in any way, if I could use that trigger word here, was the exclusion of cigarettes. Instead of a pack of smokes, Snake has an item called the Fogger. Fine, who cares? But still, that wasn't cut to get an E rating. That was a Nintendo thing. They didn't allow that stuff on the Game Boy. But still, it got the E rating, so I guess little Timmy can play Ghost Babel if he wants. Back to Black Chamber, this group really feels fleshed out for how little they're actually on screen, and their motivations and reasons for wanting to fight Snake and be involved with the GLF definitely feel in line with other Metal Gear villains. In fact, Black Chamber kind of feels more like villains from later games. They're much more tight-knit than Foxhound seem to be, almost like a family, which makes them closer to Dead Cell from Metal Gear Solid 2 in that regard. Their backstory also kind of supports this. Speaking of backstory, Black Chamber was essentially Foxhound's backup team, or sometimes cleanup crew. That sounds an awful lot like a certain organization from Metal Gear Solid 5. Interesting. Actually, that's the thing about Ghost Babel. Even though it went back to 2D, there's a huge amount of stuff that actually moved the series forward. It was ahead of its time in some respects. That aside, it does tie very heavily into the first Metal Gear. Since both games take place in the same location, it's actually more of a sequel to that game than Metal Gear Solid is, and that's the canon one.
What are you talking about?
You can even find the remains of that game's Metal Gear in the basement of the facility. In a lot of ways, this is actually one of the freshest sequels in the series at the time, because Metal Gear 2 was more or less Metal Gear 1 again, and Metal Gear Solid was more or less Metal Gear 2 again. Of course, that's a wild oversimplification, but still. Also, being 2D isn't holding the game back at all. The game has tons of great set pieces that still feel very fun and cinematic. For example, there's a sequence where you run from missile strikes through a minefield. It's just as tense and exciting as sections like the comm tower climb in Metal Gear Solid. There's also multiple sections where you use boxes to navigate a warehouse. It sounds really stupid, but it's actually a really clever way to use the Gameboy Color platform. You see, each box is a color and it corresponds to a path in these warehouses. It's fun, and they do lean on it a few too many times, but it was interesting to see them put those kind of puzzles in the game. There's plenty of that sort of excitement across the game's 13 stages, which, let's talk about that for a second. Dividing the game into sections like that is fine, but you get a grade at the end of those levels, based on who knows, because I only ever got a rating of terrible. Oh, we got stages ranked terrible. That's not a rank. You can't do that. Rank terrible? I only got found one time. Rank terrible. It's not even like a B or C. It's just rank terrible. No, wait. There was the one time I performed perfectly and got a poor. Ah, what do I have to do? 0 times found, 0 times killed, 0 rations used, poor? Poor? What do I need to do to get good? Adequate? Okay. Christ. Hell, by the end of the game, I would have taken a fine. The game is also beautiful. I mean, take a look at this shot. It's not just that the sprite work is fantastic, the art direction is also perfect. Snake's design is super badass, the members of Black Chamber are all memorable and look super cool, and the Metal Gear is maybe my favorite design of any Metal Gear in the series. Look how cool that thing is. They really just packed so much into that tiny cartridge. It's easily the best 2D Metal Gear game, and also my favorite handheld Metal Gear game, even above Peace Walker. And this is coming from someone who really liked Metal Gear Acid, so it's not the lightweight competition you might think it is. Oh, speaking of, the director of this game, Shinta Nojiri, actually went on to make Metal Gear Acid, so the dude has some serious Metal Gear cred in my book. I know I didn't talk a ton about the story, but that's mostly because I'd like you to play it, but I do really like the direction that the story takes. Like I said, there are many elements of this game's plot and the characters that I fully believe went on to inspire further titles, even indirectly. So if you haven't played Ghost Babel, I really think you should go do it. It punches way above its weight class, and it really feels like a game with its own identity. I kind of would have liked a whole side series in this style and following its own continuity, but I still do like the handheld Metal Gear games we ended up with. Oh, and by the way, some of you know this, but HDF is pro emulation. I'm not saying that for any particular reason, just letting you know.